All right, we are here, episode 5, guys. We have kind of a special episode today, Dad. And
Do we?
yeah, all we're gonna be talking about, Dad, is stories.
Stories.
And then we're gonna cut them up. We're gonna edit them, make them real funny. It's gonna be good.
Okay.
So let's just get right into it, Dad. You have a lot of stories.
I do.
We
Well,
know
when
this.
you live a long time, you end up with quite a few stories.
I think that's kind of a good thing about growing old. Like as the older you get, the better stories that you have. Hopefully.
Well, I mean, it's when they often say, "What's your story?" or "What's the backstory?" There's more chapters the older you get.
Yeah.
That's all. There's just more chapters. Where do you want my story? In my 20s, my 30s, my 40s? So it's the same. It'll be the same for you.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
I know.
It's a bigger book later on.
And you've told me so many great stories that just allow everybody around us to just get a good laugh in. And the one that I wanted to talk about was what was the pilot story?
The pilot story,
Yes.
where I lost the radio.
Yes.
Okay, sure.
Tell me about that one.
Well, when I was in my 20s, I got my pilot's license. And my dad had been a pilot in the Air Force and everything. And even after the Air Force, he kept his license and flew a lot. I grew up in small aircraft a lot. And so it was sort of natural to learn about it. So I got my license, and we were living in Dallas, Texas at the time, and there was an airport there, not terribly far away from where we lived. And so we bought a little plane, and it was called an air coupe. It was made in France, I believe. It had 2 seats. It was like flying an MG, for those that know what an MG is, a small sports car. Think like a small cockpit, side by side, not one in front of the other. Yeah. And it had low wings, so you would step on the wing to get into the cockpit, okay? So anyway, that was the plane. And one time, once I got my license, people wanted to go up with me and all that kind of thing. So, and I would take friends. So one time, I took a friend, his name was Mark, and we went flying around the area and spent an hour or so just looking at stuff from above. And then the plane was somewhat old. In fact, it was old.
Like ancient old or like
it was from the 50s. And this would have been in the late 70s.
she's got some age on her.
Yeah. And so I had we got back to the airport, and there's a lot of protocol about landing in a controlled airspace. You don't just fly in and land. I mean, there's a sequence of events you have to go through to be able to get permission to land. Now, if it's an uncontrolled airport, it's different. But if it's controlled, meaning there's a tower, people talk to you, you have to go through a process. Speak to them from so many miles out, get permission. They'll put you in the landing sequence. You land, and that's fine.
You get to do that cool little code 1-3 breaker 1.
Sure. Every plane has a unique, identifying number.
That's cool.
So I called them. I called the tower from where I'm supposed to, and the radio wouldn't work. I couldn't get anybody to respond. I tried again, and of course I tried again. I spun the dial on the radio thinking, man, maybe there's something here I can do. I knew I was on the right frequency, but so the radio had gone out. The long and the short of it is, there was a glitch in the radio. And and it's a somewhat busy airport, private airport. Anyway, I just got into the normal pattern that you're supposed to land based on the prevailing wind direction, whether you land into the south or land into the north. But I had been to this airport enough times, I knew where the pattern was. So I just entered the pattern. I looked at the tower. This is the part that, I do take some culpability with, and that is, if you can't communicate with the tower, they have a light gun thing that they can flash at you. And you're supposed to have those codes sort of memorized, two flashes, two longer flashes, maybe with two shorter ones in a certain sequence means, go around or permission to land or don't land or whatever. Well, anyway, I didn't have those memorized.
Oh, was he flashing you?
Well, when I got close, I could see that he was, but it was meaningless.
Yeah, because you couldn't understand.
Yeah, you know how like on board of a boat, like in the movies, the guys will raise a flag and they'll like use flag signals to in the old movies to like communicate with like a pilot who's going to land on board of an aircraft carrier or something. Well, same thing with this light gun. But if you don't know what the signals are, then it's meaningless, and it was meaningless. So anyway, I suspected that they were telling me not to land, okay, but I wasn't 100% sure, and I didn't see any aircraft in front of me, and I didn't see any aircraft behind me, so I felt like I'm not endangering anyone's life. I know enough not to just jump in front of somebody. So I landed. I went through just the normal process, lined up on the runway, landed, taxied over to what they call a tie-down area where you tie down your aircraft. And, well, we hadn't even so much as cut the engine on the plane before this golf cart-looking guy came over and waved me over to him. Real stern looking fellow. Just think military. You're close. I got out and Mark got out and the guy said to me, "What's your problem?" I said, my radio went out." "Uh-huh. The tower wants to talk to you." "Okay, let me finish." "No, right now." "Oh. Well, hey, Mark, why don't you hang here by the aircraft and I'll go to the tower." And the guy said, "Quit dawdling. Come on, let's go." It's like, dude. Okay, so I got in the golf cart thing with him and we went over to the tower, which was on the other side of the airport. It took a little while to get there. And we went up into this room and this guy, just real serious looking fellow, said, "Let me see your license." So I had my little paper license. Back then, it didn't have a picture on it or anything. It just, yeah. So he goes, "Don't you know enough about that you're supposed to talk to the tower and there's a certain sequence and all this stuff," however he put it. I said, "Yeah, I know, but my radio went out." "Don't you know about the light signals?" Or he called them something else. I said, "I know that they're there." Guy rolled his eyes, I said, "But I just didn't remember what they meant." You have to understand, I was about 24, maybe, with all of about a year of flying behind me, legal flying. Anyway, so the guy said, "Well, I gave you the signal not to land." And I, of course, being a young person, started to give him a rebuttal like, "What was I supposed to do?" That kind of deal. But as soon as I started to say something like that, he said, "Don't say one word. You'll just get in more trouble." I said, "Oh, okay." He goes, "Be quiet." I hadn't even said anything. It's like, So he told the guy, he said, "Go follow Mr. Brown back over there to the whatever it was and check the radio and report back to me." Like I say, this was a very military operation. So the guy and I went back over to the plane and he said, "Turn on the key or power up the radio," or whatever he said. So I did. He got in, or he stood on the wing and leaned over into the aircraft and into the cockpit and said, "Okay, tune to whatever frequency," and I did. Of course, you have to understand, at that moment, I totally anticipated the radio would work fine. Because is that not the way that usually is?
That's exactly the way it usually is.
And so it's sort of like with your car. You have a problem, you take it to the mechanic, it works flawlessly now. It's the same thing. So I just, I was sweating bullets, really. Well, it didn't work.
Thank God.
I know. And the guy reached over. He tried to manipulate certain, buttons and knobs. It was a pretty simple radio, though. Think old car radio. A few push buttons, a few knobs. It wasn't that complicated. Well, anyway, he said, you've got 24 hours to fix this radio. In the meantime, this plane is, he didn't use the word impounded, but is restricted from flying. It's like, oh, okay. And gosh, I thought to myself, why would I want to fly? I got no radio. So anyway, the guy went off, no goodbye, or hey, I understands, or hey, it'll be okay, or my friend started to ask the guy like, hey, what's the penalty if he doesn't do it? But fortunately, he didn't say that, In fact, my friend's biggest concern was, am I going to go to jail too? That kind of thing, But we didn't go to jail or anything. So I took it to the next day. I, of course, got a radio shop at the airport to look at it, and there was a lot of problems. They had to basically replace the radio. And then, upon completion of that, I submitted the paperwork to the tower, and I never heard from them again. Not a, hey, good job, or go to hell, or, man, you guys aren't welcome. But, I mean, I got it done. But it was pretty scary while it was going on. When you're younger, you don't know what the penalties are, and so that was the story about, that was one of the stories about my my attempts to be a pilot.
It lasted for a little bit, it sounds like.
It lasted for a little bit.
Good. That's an amazing story. I remember you told that story when we were in Texas a few months ago to my uncle and stuff, and that was just so funny.
Yeah.
It's such a great story.
Well, I survived it. I'm glad to say I didn't cause anybody any trouble, any harm, I should say. I caused the tower trouble, but anyway, we do things in our youth that sometimes we look back on and realize could have been much worse, but you got through. Yeah. So that was one of those.
I don't want to make you talk so much, but do you want to go into the next one?
Sure. Well, as far as that, things could have been worse department, we get by, most of us, with things that it's only later when we look back on them, we realize that was crazy.
I skated.
I got through that. Wow, that's amazing. I couldn't have done it if I tried. And one of those was I went to Denver, Colorado one time with a buddy of mine from high school. It was one of these 2 weeks off for Christmas deals, and what do you want to do? And this kid had family in Colorado, and we flew up there and stayed with I believe it was his aunt.
Who flew up there with you?
Me and this kid.
Oh, so you flew him? Okay.
No, in this instance, we just took a commercial airliner.
Oh.
Yeah. And we went up to Colorado and stayed with his aunt and uncle. And I think he had a cousin or something living there too. Doesn't matter. But I had been to Colorado many times, or several times in my life, so it wasn't a new experience for me. In fact, my older brother was born in Colorado. But what I was going to say is we got bored pretty quickly at the aunt's house. And I had the wild idea to go visit a girl I had met. I was a little bit girl crazy, I'll be honest with you. And so that's not unusual for a lot of guys. And I guess I would have been about 15. I'm just guessing. It's a long time ago. Yeah, probably about 15. Might have been 14. Yeah, that's probably about right. And so we told the aunt we were going to go to one of his pals for a few days or a couple of days to stay with them in Denver.
Ballsy.
Yeah. And but instead we with just a few bucks in our pocket, and I don't think we might have had a backpack, I guess, maybe, I don't know. We went out on the highway and hitchhiked. Yeah.
Oh my God.
I know. And the goal was to go to Aspen, Colorado. That's a pretty far piece from Denver. You could look at it on the map and Google it, but it's high mountains, and it's windy.
Cold.
Yes, this would have been around Christmas time, so certainly there was some snow on the ground.
Oh my God.
And and there would have been more snow up in Aspen, which is higher. Well, I think if you were driving it, it would have taken you about 3 to 4 hours. I'm just guessing, with good tires and good weather. But we were hitchhiking, so we got a ride rather quickly, as I recall, and it took us way into the mountains. The guy was going to turn off. He said, "Can I leave you here?" We said, "Sure, no big deal." We're thinking like, there'll be another bus along in a minute. Well, it was a lot colder where he let us off. And we were coming out of Texas, so we didn't have like big parkas on and the clothes they have today. We had probably jean jackets and maybe a sweater. I don't know. We didn't have much on. I know I didn't have gloves. Anyway, we were there. We hitchhiked and hitchhiked and hitchhiked, and we just couldn't get a ride. The sun is starting to descend now. And so the temperature, if you know about the mountains, as soon as that sun goes down, it starts to plunge even further. So let's say it was 25 degrees with the sun up. It now was in the upper teens. A little wind. 2 skinny guys on the side of the road, teenagers. Well, I'm grateful to say that a family, a man and a wife, and as I recall, a little girl picked us up. "Where are you going?" "We're going to Aspen." They go, "Aspen?" Like, man, that's 100-something miles from here, It's like, "Yeah, that's where we're going." Well, we're not going there. We're going to so-and-so, but I'll tell you what I'll do. How old are you kids? That kind of deal. We told them. Why are you doing this? We're just going to go, we're going to go meet a girl, that famous "it's about a girl" thing. He knew about a girl because he had a wife and he had this little kid. So it's like, I get it. So they had a little powwow, and she was like, "Okay." And so they took us into Aspen, dropped us off.
Oh my God, kind Samaritans.
I know. I do not remember that we paid them. I don't remember any of the conversation about all that. We were grateful for the heater in the car, and we got to Aspen, thanked them profusely.
They kind of saved your life, honestly.
It's true.
It's a way to look at it.
Sure.
Because you don't know how long it would have taken you to,
Yeah.
give
No,
them a ride.
you don't know. This is the thing about looking back at events. You don't know, and you realize just a few little movements of the chess pieces, so to speak, could have changed the whole thing. But because you get through, you think, "Oh, well, somebody would have picked us up." Not necessarily. So anyway, this would have been in the late 60s, you see. And a lot of people hitchhiked more then. There wasn't the fear of, some murderer there is now. Particularly two skinny little teenagers on the side of the road. We didn't look very threatening, I'm sure.
Yeah.
As I recall, I was wearing a headband with the American flags, one after the other, like a little 1-inch fabric band. I had somewhat long hair. Not that long, but somewhat. Mm-hmm. And so we looked like 2 kids that were on our way to a rock and roll show or something. But we got there, and so now it's dark. And it's been a long day for us.
And have you notified this girl that you're coming there?
No, I had no phone number.
Oh
I did not even know her
God.
last name.
Oh my God.
But the thing about it is I knew where her family had a condominium. I remembered that. And and she was super nice. And the reason I knew her is I had met her on another trip to Aspen the year before.
Okay.
That's how I knew her. She wasn't like from my school or anything. I won't get into that whole story, but I met her in a sort of just a friendly way on another trip. So we knocked on. We walked over. Of course, we're walking everywhere. We walked over to the condominium complex and knocked on the door.
No Uber?
There was no such a thing. No. And if there had been, I'm not sure we would have had the money, but I know we wouldn't have had a credit card. I don't even know if credit cards existed. I guess they did. Of course they did, but we didn't have one. So, shock of shocks, she answers the door with her sister standing nearby. Parents sort of in the background. Little Christmas tree. You know.
Yeah. Little setup.
Little setup.
Ooh,
What? Oh, hi. She recognized me. That's pretty memorable. Hey, Melody, or whatever her name was. What are y'all doing? Oh, this is my friend. I introduced. You want to come in? Yeah. Yeah, by now it's about 8 degrees outside. So, yeah, we want to come in. So, the mom and dad warily are looking. Oh, this is, I met this guy last year, et cetera, et cetera. She made some minimum introductions. Where are you guys staying? You know, the dad cut straight to the, like, are you guys up here skiing? That kind of deal. No, we just got here. From where? Denver. Oh, how'd you get here? We hitchhiked.
Oh my God.
You hitchhiked. Where are you staying? We don't have anywhere to stay. We just got here. They look at each other like, okay, it's crazy time. You know, Louise, whatever the wife's name was. There's a lot of silence in the room.
Did you feel bad about this, or were you just...
No, because I was all of 15 or 16 and grateful to be warm, and she was a beautiful girl, and her sister wasn't bad either. And it was like, these are two guys in an apartment with two strange people about the same age. We were all pretty close to the same age. And we didn't think about the future too much. You know, this is the thing about being young. You don't fear the future too much. So the dad or the mom or whoever said, boys, if you need a night on the couch, and they kind of eyeballed the couch over there, you're welcome to spend the night here.
Oh, she saved your life too.
Yeah. Sure. There's no like, no, thanks anyway. We appreciate it. But no, it was like, sure. So I guess you're hungry. Yeah. I remember they were making spaghetti. Maybe that's why I like spaghetti so much. Anyway, we ate. We spent the night. I cannot remember any other details. Nothing weird happened or anything. They hung definitely all close together, though.
What does that mean?
The mom and dad didn't disappear into some back room. Everybody was sort of together in the same space, is what I'm trying to say. Small condominium anyway, but the next morning we were given some breakfast, and it was obviously time to leave. There were some things I had wanted to show my friend in Aspen from my previous journeys, but I think at that point we were aware it may take us a while to get home. So rather than spend we knew we had no place else to stay the next night. So, their kindness had a certain limit, and I was pretty clearly communicated one night. So we went out to the highway the next day and started hitchhiking. It was much easier to get back.
Huh.
But I'll always remember that's called really dodging a bullet big time, because we didn't have any real plan. We hadn't prepared, and we hadn't taken a bunch of stuff with us in the event of and all that sort of thing. We didn't really prepare with money or a backup plan that, if we have to buy a motel room, we need $100 or whatever it would have cost back then. So I realize I have several of these in my file drawer, but it was about a girl. It was about the pursuit of sort of something fun and really pretty thoughtless, all in all, and relying on strangers to kind of get through it. Of course, now I realize it's pretty arrogant, and it's not necessarily, I would not recommend it to anybody, but we didn't think that way back then. Yeah, so that was one story about our near escape through the high passes in the Rockies.
Beautiful. And you've had some other things in Colorado too. You've camped out there a lot.
I have
driven up there a lot. I mean, it's pretty close to Texas, so
it is.
When you want to go on a hike, or not a hike, a camping excursion, that's where you'd go normally, I feel like.
Yes.
Or Oklahoma, which is even closer.
Oh, no, I wouldn't go to Oklahoma.
You wouldn't?
No.
Why is that?
Well, it's not that beautiful. It's not that different a weather.
Really?
It's hot, just like Texas is hot. If you're going to try to get away from it, you're going to go higher elevation. So you go to New Mexico or you go to Colorado, period. New Mexico's sort of the same thing, only kind of worse. Yeah. So, anyway, no, I've had other experiences. I went to Colorado one time, and went camping. I was on my own. I took a tent, and I was more prepared this time. Plus, I was a little bit older, a couple years older. And I drove my Volkswagen Beetle up there, and I camped. It was in the Aspen area. That seemed to be my spot.
Huh.
And I met these free-spirited types. Back then, a lot of kids were traveling. You saw people with backpacks and long hair and just sort of exploring. You don't see that. Nowadays, it's homeless, maybe you see, that look like this.
Yeah, no, it's
Back then, it was more like, no, we're just, high school's out for the summer. We're traveling around the West, and we're doing this, doing that, and people didn't carry music with them. There was no way to carry music with them. I mean, you had maybe a radio, a transistor radio, but that's it. So a lot of that's all changed. Nobody's plugged into anything. There is no electronics. They're just camping, eating dried noodles and, boiling water to make basic stuff.
Sounds fairly primitive.
Well, looking back on it, it is.
Nonetheless fun, though, I bet.
It was.
Or had its moments, I guess.
There'd
be terrible parts, too.
I met these people. I didn't know them. There was about 5 or 6 of them. A couple of girls and 2 or 3 guys, as I recall. Maybe there was 3 girls. It was a decent-sized group. They were from California. They were in the West, traveling around. They were a little older than me. A year or 2 or 3 even, maybe.
And how old were you now? You were 17,
I was 16.
18? Okay.
I might have been 17. Yes, I might have been 17 now that I'm thinking about it. But they said, yeah, you can camp with us, The conversation went to that. Where you staying? Where you camping and all? And they said, we're about 30 minutes out of town up this road, and hell, just come with us, So it was sort of a trip, sort of an Alice's Restaurant kind of we're just going. And we went, and I camped with them for a while. It was an amazing group to have stumbled on. They were all very unique and different. And I'll always remember this one guy. He was the oldest one. He was experimenting with not talking.
What the fuck?
Yeah, he hadn't spoken.
Like a monk. He's a monk.
Yeah. He hadn't spoken in months.
Why?
Supposedly. This is what he said, that's funny to say. His girlfriend said.
No
now,
way.
he could write. He could write, and he would write on a pad and say something like, you want to help make dinner, that kind of thing. But he didn't speak. Nothing out loud. No audible. Nothing. He was a neat guy. I remember he was neat looking. He
sounds fairly neat.
He had long blonde hair parted in the middle and no facial hair. He was thin. He was very kind kind of a leader type.
He can't speak though.
He can't, no, but you could just tell he was like the leader of the pack somehow. Yeah, maybe because he was the oldest. Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah, and his girlfriend was a terrific person. Tons of fun. And
That's insane.
yeah, they all came out of like Los Angeles or somewhere.
Sounds like LA behavior.
Yeah, and this would have been just before Woodstock and all. This is like, I'm going to say 67. Yeah, probably. 68. Right in there. But anyway, I'll always remember that guy. There's a bunch of stuff that happened, but basically we lived on this land that nobody owned. And in the whole time we were there, which was, I guess, a couple of weeks or 10 days or something, I don't remember anybody ever coming to talk to us or ask for a permit, or it wasn't an improved campsite. It was just a field or a meadow, really, in the mountains off the beaten path. And, rocks had been pushed together to make a fire ring, and we slept. There was a lean-to, but all the rest of us just slept out in the open in our sleeping bags.
What's a lean-to?
A lean-to is just like a tent, but it's open on one side. It's just kind of attached to, say, a tree or something, and it just goes off at an angle, like 45-degree angle to keep the rain off you, and you just sleep underneath it. But I'll always remember that too. It was I remember that nobody exchanged any phone numbers, or nobody was, when it was over and they were going to move on. Hell, who knows where they were going? New Hampshire? I have no idea. Nobody was like, now stay in touch or be sure to write us. Or, nuh-uh. That was the magic, too, of the time. People came and went. They bumped into each other. They just sort of came together. It was like, goodbye. So, hey, take it easy, brother. That kind of deal. Very much like the music of the times. So when you listen to oldies stations, or you're listening to something like the Lovin' Spoonful or some band from that era, there's a certain vibe about the lack of sort of pressure on things, the impermanence, if that's a word, the sort of freewheeling feel of the time. I mean, it was there. Nobody's pretending, and the music echoed it. Literature echoed it. A lot of things but the people got through. The kids or the young people who went through this time, like me, so many of us had all these kinds of experiences where we wish we could have maybe held on to it longer, or shared more. But we just kind of passed like ships in the night, so.
And so what's the end of that story? Like, so you leave them, and then didn't you tell me one time, I think I've heard the story before, where then were in Hawaii like 20 years later or something, or like 10 years later?
Oh, yes.
And you saw one of the guys there.
I did.
Was it the guy who couldn't speak?
No, it wasn't that guy. It was another guy.
Oh, okay.
This was this was one of these overlaps. We all have these experiences if we live, a sort of a normal life. You're going to have these overlaps. This kind of, you could call it a coincidence, I suppose. But years later, a couple years later, I got married at 19, and I was at college in Austin at the time, and we went on a honeymoon to Hawaii. My parents graciously bought us this trip to Waikiki, and we were walking down the sidewalk at night, one of the main roads or drags there in Waikiki, Kalakau Avenue or some name like that. A lot of shops and restaurants and all. Anyway, and we're walking along, me and my young wife, and this guy comes from the opposite direction, and our eyes meet, and he kind of points a finger like, I know you. It's like, I know you too, or whatever I might have said or uttered. And it was like, where do I know you from? It's like, hey man, we camped together in Colorado. And it was that guy. It was one of those guys. And I only remembered his first name. and it was completely boring, like Joe. It may have been Joe. So I never knew his last name either. Anyway, we had a big old backslapping. Hey, how you doing? Wow, this is my wife. Oh, you're married and all that. He was with some other guy. I don't know who he was with. He was, as I recall, he might have been in the service. But you have to also understand at that time, the background to all this was the Vietnam War.
Did that happen? When did that happen? In 60 what?
Well, the Vietnam War went on for a long time, pretty much all of the 60s and the early 70s. But I kind of think now that he told me he had been drafted. The draft was going on. If you were over 18 at the time.
And you skated by, I remember that.
I skated by because...
Your number was like barely not in.
Well, anyway, to finish the story on the guy, we just, again, one more time, we did not exchange phone numbers or let's get back in touches or anything. We just had a few minutes on a sidewalk in Waikiki and wow, crazy. And I remember telling my wife at the time about who he was. And we both talked about how, what's the likelihood of you bump into somebody in Colorado, years later you bump into somebody on the streets of Waikiki, same guy, no planning. Wow. You know,
yeah.
So, I mean, movies and books are written about this kind of happenstance, but it does happen. And when it happens to you, you kind of wonder, am I supposed to get a lesson from that? Or should I have made more of it? Or what's the purpose? But you will find you don't get an answer. There is no answer to that. It's just it's sort of a mystery. But getting back to the thing about Vietnam, I was the last year of the draft, the lottery. They changed it from, well, for a while it was if you're in college, you have a student deferment.
Which means you didn't have to go to the draft.
Right. You had to sign up at 18, and you still have to do that, technically.
Still right now?
Yes.
No.
Yes, at 18, you'll have to advise the government of where you live and what your name is and stuff. They're not going to draft you, but they want to know where everybody is, okay?
Oh, okay.
You have to register for it.
Okay.
It's a federal law.
Huh.
Now, you could say, I'm not going to do it, and probably nothing will happen. But I did it, and they're still asking for people to do that. But anyway, as the war went worse and worse, and more people were dying, and it really wasn't working out too great at all, they said, okay, no more student deferment. So we're going to instead go to a lottery system. So 1 through 365, representing each day of the calendar. And we throw it in a barrel, and we turn it. And once a month or once a week or once a year, I have no idea how frequent this thing happened, but the numbers come up. And some years, they took up to like 100 and, let's just say, 80. Some years, they took up to 120.
Dude, you barely got by, bro.
I did. They took up to 100. This is my memory. They took up to 110 that year. So if you were in the first 110 days that were pulled, you could expect a letter saying, report to the whatever office, and you're going to be considered for, service. That's where a lot of people went off to Canada or chopped off a finger or
Did you know anybody who actually did chop off a finger?
No, only in a book.
It's okay, so that was not realistic.
No, it happened though, but I heard about it. Or somebody would, people would get some doctor to say they had some condition, asthma or something, and try to get out of it. But it was considered sort of a death sentence if you went, because they were dying very frequently over there then. It was not going well. And It was a terrible jungle war. It wasn't some battlefield Iwo Jima thing. It was looked at as a very scary place. I mean, anyway, but my number was higher, and they did not call me. My brother was also in that same lottery. His was closer to the pick, but he also was higher.
Thank the Lord.
And then the very next year, they did away with the draft. or with the lottery system.
God.
But I'll also always remember that I was in the student union building where a black and white TV was on wheels and had been brought in, and there was dozens and dozens and dozens of guys watching this lottery pull.
No, that's so crazy.
Yeah, and I was a freshman in college. My brother was a junior, or I guess he would have been a junior. And everybody's got long hair and, listening to, whatever was out. I started to say Jimi Hendrix, but, I only said that because his music has been made famous post-Vietnam. But I'll always remember the first pick was like March 18th. It wasn't March 18th, but it was something in the spring like that. And there was a guy in the room with that birthday. Oh, he's going. So
He's dead.
He screamed, or he yelled, or he threw down his book he was holding or something, and shouted out something, God damn it, or whatever. Who knows what he said? But he left the room. And there was a lot of silence. Not like, it'll be okay, bro, or no.
Because that guy's probably fucking dead.
Well, you don't know for sure.
Yeah.
Just that the attrition was real bad at that time. The Tet Offensive, you can look it up. A lot of stuff was going on where we were throwing a lot of bodies at the problem, and it just wasn't working out. And anyway, and there were several other people in the room that night who were selected, or whose birthday was selected. I have no idea what happened to them. They weren't my pals. I didn't stay up with them. I was just interested in my birth date and my brother's birth date, and we both skated. If you want to call it skated.
Definitely.
But, I don't look at it as skating because we still had to go through the stress of it. We were still in it.
Yeah, but compared to other people who actually got their name called, I think that you're really lucky.
You're right. And so I'm grateful. See, that's another thing. When you live long enough, you're going to have these close, and I might, hey, look, you'll never know when the road not taken, as the Robert Frost poem talks about. I have no idea what would have happened. You can pretend you think you'll know, but you don't know.
You would have died, probably.
You don't know that.
No, I don't know that, but
no one knows
compared to the number who did die,
yeah. Anyway,
even if you didn't die, you may have gotten some limb blown off or some shit,
Yeah.
or just shot,
Yeah.
Then you turn into one of these guys who just can't walk now. Sad.
Yeah.
That's crazy, man.
Well, that's just sort of a snapshot of the times. It's not that's clearly my story or a chapter in my story, but it's also the way it was for a lot of guys at the time. I can't say about how it was for girls because I wasn't one, but I'm sure they had their own challenges and things like that. I mean, I'm sure, but it was pretty weird days, when looking back on it. Yeah. But again, part of that youth getting by, you look back and you realize you came close many times to true disaster, maybe the end of your story, but you made it on through. Of course, you'll also know that people that didn't make it through as you go along. So,
was running away a common thing for people in your generation? Because now I don't know any runaways. There might be people who have got emancipated. Is that what the word is?
Emancipated means freed from bondage.
Bondage, you don't want to probably use that word.
Free from the constraints of others.
Yeah, but when you're your parents, maybe you only have a single parent, and you get emancipated at 17, so you're basically an adult.
Uh-huh.
But I've had friends who have done that.
Uh-huh.
One, but was running away common in your generation or no? Did you know anybody who ran away?
It was common.
One in every 20 or one in every 50?
No, I don't think it was those numbers, but I don't know for sure. I know it was so common that in the windows of a lot of houses, maybe 1 out of 100 houses you drove by, pretty common, you'd see a little symbol. As I recall, the symbol was a hand. It was a graphic that showed, 5 fingers, a palm, and it had some slogan or words like, a safe place, or help is here, or, something. Meaning, if you're a runaway, you can knock on our door and we'll give you a meal, okay? You can sleep on the couch.
Huh.
Yeah, so it was common enough that was out there. There was a lot of, it's sort of like when I was telling you about that camping in Colorado and running across those 6 people or however many there were. they weren't running away, but they were on the road. They were wandering, and so there was a lot of people doing that. Looking for, it's easy to stereotype and say, they were looking for themselves, or they were trying to find peace. Nah, I think it was just that they didn't want to get into a job and just get swallowed alive at a young age with those kind of circumstances. So they were exploring and wandering and checking things out. Now it's not looked upon the same way, obviously, and you think, well, this is a shirker, or this is somebody that is not taking, responsibility, or is a homeless person who's, out for, whatever free things they can get. But back then, it wasn't really that weird to see people from outside your community standing around somewhere. They're not begging, though. They weren't begging. It wasn't like they're standing in front of a movie theater asking for money. It wasn't like that. Just maybe they're camping out in some field somewhere. So not really bothering anybody. But so it was more common, but running away, like running away from responsibility or running away from home, yeah, that was pretty common. Yeah. In fact, I knew a guy, but he didn't like his home life, and he talked about running away, and he talked to his pals, and I was one of his pals, about he's going to do it. And then he did it. And the amazing thing, I'll always look back on that guy, was he went somewhere, and because he was older looking and he had a fake ID that showed him to be over 18, he got a job. He got a job, good enough job to afford an apartment in a distant city. And he was gone for, this is my memory now, I may make a mistake, but I believe he was gone for about 2 years.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah. I know it was a year, but it might have been like 2 years, because as school would come and go and people be like, does anybody know where X is? It's like, he ain't here anymore. But he was still on the rolls. Like, he should be in our class. So he was, so I did know that guy, and
how did he get by? Did you ever talk to him after he left?
Of course.
You
he
did?
worked. He worked as a waiter.
I know, but like, did you know where he is, or did you just kind of like have a vague idea, or like?
I did not know where he was.
That's probably a good thing, because then his parents would probably come to you and be like, "Yeah, you got."
Oh, I got hit. Yeah, I was asked, "Do I know?" and everything, but I didn't know. So no, he did not communicate. No letters, no telephone, nothing. Again, I know this is crazy, but no cell phones. See, that's changed everything.
It's literally changed everything.
Yeah, and so if you had to go put a couple of quarters in a phone booth and dial somebody's number, and you got 3 minutes or 4 minutes before it dinged again and said put more money in, phoning was a little bit rarer. You get a phone call, hey, I'm at the phone booth and whatever. Oakland, California, well, you wouldn't be able to trace it anyway. You wouldn't know where the person is anyway. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so, and the idea that, well, if you get an apartment, you'll get a phone. No, people didn't. Not unless they needed it. It wasn't so common. I know that sounds like super antique times, but, the communication was different, So
That's crazy.
it is crazy. Yeah.
I wonder where that guy is now.
Well,
Chilling. Do you think
he's
he's still alive?
yes,
You do.
I know he is.
Oh.
But like most people who survive, he accepted responsibility along the way with wives and kids and jobs, and he worked, or maybe he's still working, and is a productive member of society, I suppose. I don't mean he's an exemplary citizen or anything, but whatever that means. But I just think he fell between the white lines and went on down the road in a more traditional way.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So he fell back into it.
Yeah, but I don't think he fell back into it in the way that, some Leave It to Beaver sort of stereotypical, I'm selling insurance out here and I'm good. I don't mean like that, but fell back into it meaning picked up the normal pace that most working people do. I say most. I don't even know what that means anymore. But I get the impression a lot of people don't work anymore. So, but I just mean I think he accepted his older role, and then once you have kids, that certainly makes you accept certain responsibilities. There's no question about that for most people that I know. So, but that I'm not saying he's a traditional person, but I'm just saying he's probably on the outside looks just like any guy you would meet, really.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
You know, Dad, we've covered a lot, man.
Yeah.
This is great content. I feel like it's super interesting to hear, your stories, because there's so goddamn many and so many people now. Like, I'm going to grow up and I'm going to have completely different stories compared to that.
You are.
Like, there's never going to be a time in my life where I won't have my cell phone unless I lose it,
Sure.
And then I'd have a crazy story about how I didn't have my phone and it was the biggest deal.
Sure.
And I had to ask somebody to give me a ride who I don't know,
Sure.
I'm excited for those stories.
Hey, and when I was thinking about that overlap, that happenstance, that idea about coincidence, when I ran across that guy on the sidewalks of Waikiki,
Yeah.
I forgot to mention one other thing. Because first of all, I've had quite a few coincidences.
Mm-hmm.
But part of that same thing, this is crazy, about 10 or 20 years after that hitchhiking to Aspen story, I called long distance. I was working. I would have been in my 30s. I called long distance. Back then you had to do that, and you didn't just punch in one in the area code. You kind of went through an operator.
Uh-huh.
See, that's another thing we could talk about someday, how crazy that is. And I asked for I was going to make a person-to-person phone call. That means you don't have to pay for it if the person on the other end isn't there. They'll call the house, and the operator would say, I've got a call for John Smith from, Bill Jones. Will you accept the charges? Meaning you're going to pay for this call. And if John Smith's not there, they'd say, he ain't here. And the operator would say, I cannot connect your call. And then you hang up. Nobody's out any money. That's a person-to-person call.
Uh-huh.
Well, I made a person-to-person call
To who?
in my 30s. I don't know to who, but amazing as this is, when I told the operator my name, he said, and he told me his name.
Joe.
And it was kind of like, huh? He goes, Are you the guy that,
I met him, Mikey.
that was in high school with me?
Oh, it's a different guy.
That we went hitchhiking to Aspen with? It was like, yeah. He goes, yeah, his name was Ed, by the way. This is Ed. It's like, what are you doing? He goes, I work for, at that time it was Southwestern Bell or something, not AT&T. AT&T was, another entity, but he was an operator. And I happened to, out of the thousands and thousands of operators, think about this. Out of the thousands of operators that were working at that time, I just was going to make a call. I need an operator-assisted call. And that guy that I went to Denver with for that Christmas holiday was the operator. Anyway, we yucked it up for a few minutes. I can picture him with the headset on in some room with thousands of other people, and probably his supervisor's eyeballing him like, what are you doing? Get off the phone. Anyway, again, it was the weirdest coincidence. But isn't that strange?
That's awesome.
Because I never kept up with him after high school. I never. And 10, 20 years went by, and I just happened to overlap with that guy. That's insane. But you need to be kind of heads up on this coincidence thing. And for anybody listening, you never know what kind of overlap's going to happen. So what you want to do is just live your life, but treat people pretty good, because at some point, they may sit right down next to you on an airplane. You're like, holy cow, it's my music teacher from the 8th grade or something. And it's just out of left field. You have no ability to control it. It's just an absolute freak out. Sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's not a good thing. But these coincidences, I think they mean something. I don't know what, but sort of like dreams, I think they mean something. Anyway, that's all about that.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
It's crazy. When we were just in Hawaii, how should I say this real quick? Me and Miggy met that girl.
Yeah.
Or there's two girls.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And they were from San Francisco. And so when we used to live in California, I had friends who lived in San Francisco, Palo Alto area.
Yeah.
And then they lived there. And so and when I went to camp with them, like I'd meet them and then they'd go back and I'd go back to where we lived. And so they lived in Palo Alto too, the two girls that we met in Hawaii.
Yes.
Funny how it's Hawaii.
Yeah.
And I asked them if they knew anybody. They knew anybody. They said no. I was like, oh yeah, it's crazy. And then later on, like the next day that we were hanging out with them, they're like, yo, give me some more names of people that you know. So I kept going. And I probably named like 10, 15 names. And I was out of names. And I'm like, no. And then I got his name that like I knew, I just didn't say, like because it's hard to remember from like 3-4 years ago. And I said it. They were like, no way. And they actually knew them.
Wow.
So it was a mutual connection that we just happened to have. They weren't best friends with them, but they like know who they are.
Right.
And like they both of the parties like knew each other.
Right.
So like I just thought that was crazy because out of all of the girls that we could have kind of like picked up
Mm-hmm.
or like talked to and like actually spent time with and just said like saying yo, like they actually had a mutual contact, which was fucking nuts.
Completely crazy.
I don't know. Hawaii is just, I think it's a place that a lot of people go.
Well, you know what? You may have something there because, they talk about, or they used to talk about the Bermuda Triangle. Do you know about that?
Yes, I don't think Hawaii is the Bermuda Triangle.
No, but they talk about some places having a certain kind of energy, connectivity, strangeness, mystery. But you're right. Just in our little brief conversation here this morning, Hawaii's come up a few times, or it's been like this thing. And so maybe there is a more of a high chance of connections there because it's a speck of rock out in the middle of the ocean.
I
don't know.
I don't think it's that. I just think it's because so many people will go there.
Oh, well, maybe so.
And like so many people in your life, like there's bound to be some crossover. It just like it goes in the same thing as like statistics. Like it could happen.
It could happen.
And out of all of the people that you know, that raises the chances, of it.
Yeah.
And I think going to camp or having you who goes out and like hitchhikes and like meet a lot of people. Not saying that was a common occurrence, but like you did a lot of things in your life to meet a lot of people.
Yes, I did.
So out of all those people that you met, like you see one, like, yeah, I think that's 100% possible.
Sure.
And plus it's Hawaii where like everybody goes compared to like Louisville, like where no one goes. Hawaii is the spot.
Sure.
I don't know.
Yeah, maybe so.
Because Hawaii is really small.
Yeah. What we should also talk about at some point, not now, but we can, is this about when it has to do with meeting people. But another subject that's fun and that other people who are listening might be able to connect with is when you meet famous or celebrity types. You're going to, as a person, if you're out and about, it's amazing. I'm not saying you're going to bump into Britney Spears at the gas station, but you might. But in my long life, I've had quite a few when I look back on it that are somewhat memorable. I
know, we can talk about that one about Keanu Reeves doing that blow, or Keanu Reeves' girlfriend.
I don't really want to talk about that right now. I was going to talk about something else, but about a musician, but we can do that another time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Or you can go right now. Just go right now. I'm kind of interested now.
Okay, so you know who Elvis Presley is, of course.
You saw Elvis Presley.
No, I didn't see Elvis Presley.
You touched him.
No.
Oh, okay.
There was a small group of musicians, okay, that were part of his success. They were people that created songs and played on records. It was a small little coterie of musicians that went on to their own success, but they all kind of came out of the South in the 1950s. And anyway, the one time I was at an airport, and there was just some crummy flight going to some crummy city. It was not memorable, certainly not going to Hawaii or anything. I might have been flying to Houston or something. I have no idea. But I saw this guy sitting there in the lounge area, and older guy. I was in my 30s, 40s, something like that. I think I was in my 30s. There were just a few other people on the flight. It was not very crowded. That's back when, it wasn't like it is now. There's no queuing up and section A, B, C, and all that. You just sort of had a ticket, and you just, when they called the flight, you just stood in line. Well, anyway, I started talking to this guy just casually, and anyway, this was the guy that wrote Blue Suede Shoes.
What is that?
Blue Suede Shoes? It's a very famous rock and roll song. Elvis Presley made it famous, and other people have recorded it, of course, but it was recorded out of Memphis at that recording studio that was so famous back then. But anyway, he was a very important figure, but no one knew him. I like the idea of that nobody's saying, "Can I have your autograph?" Or, I like the fame that's like below the surface kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's not a very it's not a very interesting story now that I think about it, because a lot of people of your generation don't even know not only the songs, but they wouldn't know the names if you said them, So not exactly a popular person, but...
Well, it doesn't have to be. I think that it's more bigger picture stuff with what you're saying. It's like there's a lot of people in pop culture who create pop culture, but they don't get they don't get credit for it, which isn't a bad thing.
No,
like that guy may be really happy that he is not ultra famous, because I hear about people being ultra famous and then they really can't go outside anymore.
That's true.
And then that would really suck. Because I wouldn't want to go to the grocery store, walk down the street in my hometown and just be able to just say what's up to my neighbors and just go without having paparazzi follow me.
See, I think that's true, definitely, because you hear about that they complain about that. They have no more privacy. I remember John Lennon saying when he moved to New York City, one of the things he enjoyed the most was that he could be out on the sidewalk and he didn't get swamped. He just, because he changed his appearance, wore a hat and some sunglasses, he could go through the whole day without anybody picking up on who he was, and that's a real freedom to not be swamped. But it's a two-edged sword, because when you read these People magazines and stuff, you realize these famous people, when their role is over and their looks are gone, so to speak, now they're unhappy too, because not only are they not recognized, but they don't look so great anymore. You know what I'm saying? So they didn't like the fame when they had it, because it crowded them. But now they go out and no one cares who they are. It's like, oh, you were so-and-so on some TV show. It's like, yeah.
Now you look like dirt.
And now it's like, who cares? Or somebody's like, what show? A popular show that you think you'll never forget about, but you do forget about them. People forget about them. So anyway, I think that I think that fame thing has with it some aspects that are not altogether that desirable, from what I've heard. But hey, I'll take fame. Yeah, sure.
Oh, shameless.
Yeah.
All right, well, there we go, boys. That was it, boys and girls. We're done with this, man.
Okay, then.
Story time, Bulletproof Youth, episode 5. Man,
okay.
We're cruising.
Okay, great.
That was it, man.
More later.
More to come. See you guys.